I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lori Cassiv, our state programs, ASDC state programs. Let me share my screen real fast. And we're good.
Good morning, everyone. We'll get rolling here really quick. We have a lot to cover today. As Lori mentioned, please don't be afraid to submit your questions through chat. We're going to try to accumulate those questions and answers and post them so that you guys all have access to them. I know that sometimes you can't be on these webinars due to your schedule, so we want to make sure that you guys can still see those questions and answers that were asked. This morning we got quite a few folks in the room with us. Of course, we have Ori Bruce involved here, state engineer. Tricia Craycroft is in, state biologist. Denise Adkins. What's your title, Denise? She's a resource specialist. I still don't know what Denise's title is. Isn't that terrible? We got Treg in here too, DC, keeping us all on the up and up. And Ron Brooks is here with as our EQIP state coordinator. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron and have him get started with an EQIP update.
I threw that slide actually in the front right here, this Farm Bill.
Okay, so Ori, like, Ori switching it up on me.
Sorry, and then we'll put her on.
Okay. So just wanted to let you guys know that we are planning to do a Farm Bill rollout training this year. And these are the dates that we have established. You'll see that April 14th is going to be in Moscow, April 16th is here in Boise, and then April 21st is in Pocatello. Please get this on your calendar so that you can attend one of these sessions. We're going to talk about a bunch of program stuff as well as CART, potentially updates to policy. And anything else that comes up between now and then. So yeah, please get that on your calendar and you'll see more information from us as we get that agenda put together. Okay, now, Ron.
All right, guys, EQIP updates. I'm going to take just a few minutes here, tell you what I know, and then turn it over to Ori for the rest of this. EQIP policy. We learned yesterday on our national teleconference that the EQIP subpart R of the 530 manual is at e-directives and ready to publish. I checked about an hour ago or so, and it wasn't posted yet. But like I said, they told us yesterday it should be published this week on the e-directives. So once that happens, we can finish up reviewing that policy, figuring out what it all is and what it all means, and then updating our program guidance for EQIP for this year, protocols, bulletin attachments, etc. I've already been updating those documents as I can with some of the language that's in the main part of the 530 manual, but there's still a lot of specific information that will be in subpart R that we got to wait on before we can really pull everything together. So that's that. Ranking pools. We're in the process of now developing ranking pools, which past terminology, that would be ranking tools, but now they're called ranking pools. They've released the EQIP general EQIP national ranking template, so that gave us the green light to go ahead and start building ranking pools in CART. So we are underway in doing that, and we'll get those done as quick as we can. RCPP-EQIP, they have not yet released the national ranking template for those, and don't really know right now when those will be out, but they're working on those, and they'll get those released into the exhibits as soon as they can get those done. So that's kind of where we're at for EQIP right now. Stay tuned. hopefully this EQIP policy does show up here today or tomorrow in e-directives, and we can get cranking on updating the protocol document for sure and getting that out to you guys as quick as we possibly can. That's it. That's all I got.
We'll bounce back to Lori real quick.
Thanks, Ori. So real quickly, just wanted to let you guys know, Daniel Esposito is our new CSP-RCPP state coordinator. He's been on the job for a little bit, but he's been teleworking from Oregon until he could get here. But he will physically be in the office starting on Monday. So please start including Dan in your email correspondence about CSP or RCPP questions. Once he gets on board, we'll do a little, I'll shoot out a little email with his phone number and all of that kind of good stuff next week, and then there'll probably be something in the informer. But just wanted to let you guys know that he's on board and willing and able to take questions. So Tricia asked me, is it Dan or Daniel? And I call him both, and he seems to answer to both. So
what do you call your dog, though, right?
So
if he has a preference, will you let us know?
Well, I sure will. Yes, I will. I'll get in touch and see what he prefers. Okay, so as you guys know, tomorrow is our payment deadline for CSP. I just included something on there that shouldn't be on there, should be in below there. So disregard the must be on the FSA notification list. That should go with that CSP-GCI sign up to bulletin, not that other February 28th deadline. I've been working with Glenn and Carrie on these and pretty much know what's going on with everything. We will try to push forward with national to get some of these ProTrack issues resolved so that we can make those payments if we're able to, but they might not happen by that deadline. But please try to do everything you can if we can get stuff done to make that deadline. But if not, as long as I know what's going on, I can answer questions from national intelligently. Okay, next one is CSP-GCI sign up 2. As you can see, that deadline is the March 6th, 2020. That is where the applicants, to be eligible for that, need to be on that FSA notification list. And I did post that to the SharePoint yesterday under CSP-GCI. So that is there for you to double check to make sure that they have that eligibility. If they do not have that eligibility, if they are not on that list, they need to go into CSP-GCI sign up 3, which now is an option in ProTrack. Okay, so CSP renewal and our extension sign up deadlines is March 20th, 2020. As you can see, I'm asking you to prioritize the 2014 and 2015 sign-ups prior to the 2016 sign-up, just because we're not really sure how everything is going to work with the 16 sign-ups, since they will still be under contract with obligation. I'm sure they'll get all of that figured out, but please focus your efforts on 14 and 15 renewals, and the 15 is the only one that can renew and or extend, and based off of payment limitations, you will want to guide them into one option or the other. Yeah.
Was the 13th was there a deadline for the mod? Seems like the 13th was on that one list.
So I think the 13 was the obligation deadline, or obligation and promotion deadline, Treg. I don't have that in front of me,
I'll find it.
but yeah, if you can find it, let me know. Okay, next slide, Ori. So we're trying to get all of this guidance out to you as quickly as we can. Not doing a very good job of it. Hopefully that changes next week once Dan is on board. But in the interim, I have provided you their SharePoint site for National for CSP. Under this site, you'll find a bunch of helpful tools, including job sheets. As you guys will also see, the enhancements have been renamed from what they have been in years previously. So there's a helpful little walkthrough spreadsheet that Ori and I found this week.
Crosswalk, yeah.
Crosswalk, yeah. So a bunch of other stuff on there that will be helpful. We will be trying to mitigate or migrate those over to the Idaho SharePoint as we get to them. But I know you guys are going to want to start talking to your participants and they'll have questions. So in the interim, please use this link to find some helpful information. As you guys have probably realized, the CSP appendix is not available yet. According to National, it will be soon. Yep. The one in Protrax is old, so don't give that one out. If you do want to give it out just to give them kind of some general rules, that's fine, but let them know that that appendix will be changing. Some of that language in there is going to change. And the new appendix should be more consolidated as well. So just giving you a heads up on that. As soon as we get that out, we'll push that out to you guys as well so that you have that. And then you may have noticed that there are a couple new forms in Protrax for CSP, and those forms are referenced in your renewal letters. So please use the 1200 that is posted in Protrax as well as that CPA 1248 if dealing with renewals. That date on that CP 1248 is November 16th. So don't let that throw you off. That's the latest and greatest one that we should be using for those renewals. As I stated already, we will be moving those job sheets over to the Idaho SharePoint site as soon as we can. But in the interim, please use that link above to access those, to get that information. And then we are also in the process of working on the ranking. It's not available yet, so don't do anything in CART until we give you the okay. We should have those done within the next couple of weeks and know that you guys are eager to get after it. So we'll get those done as soon as we can and then let you know when we're ready for you guys to proceed. Okay?
So just a side note on anything in CART relating to ranking, and you can't proceed to pass the ready for ranking stage, so you can go ahead and do the assessments, but not the ranking portion.
So a question just came in about what is the guidance then on whether the applicants check the appendix box on the application for CSP. I'm saying go ahead and check that because we can provide those guys the appendix as soon as we get it, but really leave that up to the participants. If they're not okay checking that box yet, that's fine. They can leave that blank and still sign that application and get it submitted. And then once we do get the appendix, you can circle back with that application and have them then check that box and initial it. So really it's their comfort level, your comfort level, however you want to proceed with that.
Go to Wade.
Yeah, that's all I have. Wade, are you ready to give your update on easements?
You bet. Thanks, Lori. So with easements, things are still not completely together yet, but we're working on trying to get it there. So right now we're working on the ranking pools and hope to have those established in the next couple of days. But more importantly, we're trying to get an announcement and sign up out. And right now we're shooting for Monday or Tuesday of next week to release that bulletin. And the cutoff date for applications will most likely be April 3rd, Friday, April 3rd. So that's just the time frame we're working with right now. That's not set in stone yet, but it's pretty firm. So following the release of that sign-up bulletin, we want to try to have a meeting with the entities that would be applying for the ag land easement side, the ALs and the ALGSSs, and help them to understand all the new pieces. There's a lot of new pieces, and I won't go into all of them on the AL side this morning, but there is a new CPA 41 and 41A. That's the application form. There's new agreements. There's now a program agreement this year where we can go through ProTracks rather than our standard cooperative agreement where we go through the grants and agreements service branch. So there's quite a few new things. So we want to be able to spend some time with the entities and help them to get through what they'll need to do for those applications. So if you do hear from an entity such as TNC or Sagebrush Step or whoever it might be, and they're interested in applying in your area, just give me a call and we'll work through that with that entity together. I think that's the best way to approach it right now. Again, we're going to have more information out on this, but right now we know that there's going to be an application coming in from, most likely, from Franklin County, Idaho County, Blaine County, Lemhi County, and Teton County. I'm not sure what we'll see outside of that after the announcement comes out. On the WRE side, the important thing there would be to make sure if you do get somebody that walks in, since it is a continuous sign-up, the CPA 1200 form needs to be dated March 2019. That's the latest 1200 that's out there, and that's what they would need to complete. But our sign-up bulletin will have additional information on that as well. So I'm giving you bits and pieces of that, of what's going on here with easements, but there is a lot of different parts and pieces floating around that we're trying to get together. Again, the best thing to do, I think, at this point is if you do hear from someone, just give me a call, and I'd be happy to work with you on whoever the applicant might be. Any questions on that? Okay, well, Lori, that's about all I had unless you have something to add.
Nope, that's great. Thank you so much, Wade.
You bet.
We're done with the programs part of the stuff, so we're going to turn it over to Ori now for CART.
If you have any questions, just as a reminder, for like Lori said, go ahead and put the questions in that Q&A pod down in the bottom and submit them. You won't see everybody else's questions like we have in the past with the chat panel, but just submit your question and we'll answer it, or we'll read it off in the end as we get to them. So as Lori said, I'm going to go over some CD and CART updates. For the 2.3 trainings that we completed in December, if you got your final project to me by February 7th, we do have that updated. Chris Morrison did a great job getting those updated in AgLearn. If you didn't complete the final project, meaning you didn't send it to me, then I believe that Chris removed you from the group in AgLearn. We can re-add you to that group if you have completed it, so it shouldn't show up on your AgLearn dashboard anymore. If you haven't completed your final project, or if you submitted it after the 7th, I think there's 3 or 4 that have sent it to me since. As long as you receive an email from me that you've completed it, you'll be fine, and we'll be batching that in another period to get the AgLearn course updated. So please just send an email to me if you got some confusion, or you don't have your final project completed yet, or AgLearn isn't showing up right. Just let me know. So you should see that completed. Just a few general items regarding Conservation Desktop. So fiscal year 2020 CSP plans will be set up using the conservation plan type. This is a shift from the past. All of the practices will now show up under the conservation plan type, and that's what has to be ran through for CART. CSTWP plan type will now only be used for old CSP and for CSP-GCI starting in, well, I guess it was for sign up 1 as well, but for sign up 2, you'll make sure to use that CSPWP type plan. You also cannot build agreement items in Conservation Desktop until the application's been pre-approved through the Select Applications tool. So I sent out some guidance on that, on how to remove those items from ProTrax, because we have to have a certain order in CART before we can build the contract. I believe everyone went through and completed that, so thank you for doing that so fast to remove those items. As I stated earlier, you can only proceed to the ready for ranking phase in CART. Once the ranking pools are completed and built, then everyone will be notified to be able to go ahead and complete the rankings. At our Farm Bill rollout trainings, we are going to be demoing more of the CART ranking portion. Right now, today we're going to cover the CART assessment. So we're going to cover that ranking, and we may even do a short programs webinar covering on the ranking later as we get there. We just have to get these ranking pools put out. There's just a few things we have to make sure we have before we can publish those. So we're working on them, and we'll get there. So Toolkit is dying. Hopefully everybody knows that. I don't know if some of you may be hearing the trumpet kind of in the background. It's not working for some reason on my computer, but it may not be appropriate either, but Toolkit's dying March 12th. So make sure that you know that you need to get into Conservation Desktop and get using it and know it. I have more desktop manuals here in the state office. I can send them to you. Toolkit's been around for 20 years, just about, which is a long time for a software program to live. So it's about time that we kill it. I just completed I'm being very, I'm just done with, I'm done with Toolkit. And I completed a test last week for one of the last items that had to be complete in desktop before we shut off Toolkit, and it passed. So I'm pretty confident in saying that March 12th is going to be over. Now I'm going to give you a little ease of how it's going to happen. They're going to turn off the functionality where you check in and check out. So you're going to be able to log into Toolkit, but you're not going to be able to check in and check out anything. It's just going to be nothing. So if you send me a message and say I can't check in and check out a Toolkit plan after March 12th, I'm just not even going to reply to your email. I don't know. Maybe I will. It'll be a snarky email. But then they're going to test out, make sure that Conservation Desktop can handle all of the users, because we know that not everyone's been using desktop fully. So they're going to test it out for a few weeks and make sure that the servers and everything can handle the users and test that out. Then we'll start uninstalling Toolkit from everybody's computer. So basically you just won't have permissions to do anything after March 12th. But like I said in this slide, ArcMap will not be going away. Once we get Toolkit removed from everyone's computers, then we can update ArcMap to the most recent version, so then we can start doing the best. We do plan on providing some future guidance in not using the Toolkit toolbar, because the Toolkit toolbar will go away once Toolkit goes away. So we plan on getting some ArcGIS quick. This is how you do this. This is how you do that, without the Toolkit toolbar, in case you do need to use some ArcMap skills, GIS stuff. Okay, so from the final projects, these are just a few of the things. I sent everybody, and most everybody, an email if this happens to you. I understand it's his final project, just get it to Ori and hurry be done, which was fine for the final project, but for a final product to the participant, I feel like we could do a little better in our map products. Just a few reminders. So on the soils map, so you got to make sure and turn off the case PLU and practice layers. As you see in both the center map and the one on the left, one of them has the case PLU on and it makes the soil lines a little hard to read, and the other one has the practice layer on. Even though you didn't have the map, conservation map button hit, when you do map products, it automatically triggers that button to to give the symbology for the practices. So then it covers up the entire field. So that soil map to me is completely useless if I'm looking just at the map. So and then also on the plan map, make sure that you turn off the case POUs just to make a cleaner map so we can see through those fields. Leave on the practice schedule POUs, which is that the yellow boundary. So I think everybody saw those. We will, you'll continue to get better at these mapping and figuring out all these little things you have to do in desktop to make a good map. But just make sure that you're checking that. For the cultural resources, there's been a few requests of what is required from us to get to Darren for cultural resources, and these are just the basic steps. You'd want to use the general ad hoc map, product type, select the USA topo maps from base maps. If your base maps, if you open that up and it doesn't have the topo, you need to make sure in layer preferences that you've made that base map available. Then third, you'd want to change your map scale to be either 1 inch equals 2,000 feet or 1 to 24,000. And then down on the center toolbar, you're going to want to make sure you're zoomed in to 1 to 36,111. As soon as you zoom out to that 72,000 on your center toolbar view, your map will change to a different topo map. So every zoom level is kind of a different scale of map that gets shown. So I will be sending out these slides later too, so then you can reference these, put them in your desktop, like right in front of your face so you can see them. Another reminder is that we should only label and show practices that are not full extent. So the Planning Procedures Handbook was updated, and things I just want to highlight is that the plan map and record of decision are used together to show when, where, and to what extent the practice will be installed. So if you have full extent practices, that third bullet, the location of plan and applied conservation practices that are less than a full footprint of the POU are what need to be on the map. So anything else, the full extent do not need to be shown, because we can tell through the conservation plan or the record of decisions that that it is full extent and that we don't need to show it on the map. So you can use that by using the filter on the center toolbar. Quite a few, these next few slides are just going to go over a few questions people have been asking of how to do, what to do. Things are different than Toolkit, so I understand and I expect this. So if I send you one of these slides, just know that I'm going to try and build all of my guidance to come out kind of like this. So if you need to rename a case, here's the steps to be able to rename a case. I know some people have said, this is an old case file. I want to use the same land units, but I just want to rename the case. You can rename it to whatever you want it to be. We haven't come up with anything statewide that you should have your company name and business name or the identifier as, or just something that you can find that case file with. Similar process with renaming a practice schedule. You go into the practice schedule accordion, select manage practice schedule, and then you can just start typing in that box to rename it. In order to delete a practice schedule, there's some specific requirements, like you can't have the land unit tied to that practice schedule. You can't have practices that are planned, but you can complete a practice schedule, or if you have nothing in there, if you accidentally made duplicates, you can go in there and clean it up and change the practice status to deleted. Changing the service office for a case file. This may only apply to those who have multiple service centers in your area, or if you're taking over a case file from another service center or planner in another area. If you don't have permissions for that service center, I can do that. The ARCs can change these service centers as needed. DCs may have that ability depending on what kind of functionality or what kind of permissions that they have. Make sure you're changing the county that it's residing in and that it matches the same as the root folder. So in this example, I think Rexburg is only over Madison, but you could have if you have multiple service center or multiple counties, you could be sticking it into a different root folder. So make sure that that matches. It'll give you an error if that does that. Managing the case annotation. I did not cover this in our training, but I will try my best to explain it to you here without doing a live demo. This is within the Create Labels toolbar. So if you go to Labels and then you select Case Annotation, this is a spot where we can put our resource inventory, and you would need to add that resource inventory to add it to new layer, and then once you add that new layer, your name will change to that resource inventory as you select it. And then we can add, with that number 5, we can add and create a text annotation box. Then we would continue on typing in whatever our annotation would be, existing pump, existing pipeline, whatever. We can't change, I mean, we'd be probably showing or labeling a graphic at this point, or just trying to put something on the map. But right now, desktop, when it prints the callouts and line callout, the callout features don't show up on the map. So it's still just a little sticky, but you can add some stuff to your map. The case annotation layers will stick to that case file, so other users can see what you put in there or that you've noted. You can also use the select button from the center toolbar to move that case annotation around or locate where the drop point is for the point. Phone number updates in conservation products. So there's been a few people that have sent me requests that their phone number was wrong. We figured out eventually where we need to go to update this. It is a ticket through Empower is where this information is coming from. So if your number is wrong in training, don't worry about it. But if your number is wrong in production, then and you want it changed, let me know. We can get that changed. Please get that information to me by March 6th. I'm going to batch that to our human or our management and strategy folks so that we can get these updated. If you don't get it to me by then, that's fine. Until that default number is fixed, you can still edit that phone number. You can edit all that information in the name, city, state, phone number, and the email address information. So. Okay, Idaho provisioned production layers. So we have been loading, well, I shouldn't say we, I haven't done anything. Jerry has been busy loading all of these layers in Conservation Desktop. They are only showing up in production because in order for them to show up in training, there's a big long process to get through. So we decided to spend all of our time just on the production so that we can run CART and everything else in CD production. You can find them by turning them on in the layer preferences. So this is how you would find and add them. So you can go to the map tools, layer preferences, find that category, in this example, project data, and turn on, make it available. And then I would save. You can make multiple available at a time and then save your layer preferences. Come back to map contents from the center toolbar, and then you can turn that on or off. I wouldn't recommend having a lot of items turned on by default because it tends to slow down Conservation Desktop. So just turn it on when you need it through map contents. Okay, client search. So when creating a case file or searching for a client in draft and legacy files, you need to make sure that a county is selected. The developers have a fix right now that's ready for this March deployment. I think at the end of March, March 28th or something. I don't know when it's actually coming out. But there's a fix that's coming out to let all counties function work. When it is set to all counties, it doesn't bring back any results. So what you need to do is, like in this check marks picture, we need to make sure and select that county. Even though Marsing only has one county, for some reason not all counties is bringing back no results. So with the county, all of a sudden we get results. Okay, if you have, this is a lot. Corey's got a lot today. Okay. If you have any changes in your permissions, this is just a quick reminder of how to go in and refresh your preferences. I did this because a lot of times we grant people permissions and they say, hey, the service center is still not showing up for me. So this is where you can go to make sure. We had a few people, if you've already selected your service centers, it's going to come back with only those you've selected. If you have been granted more service centers in your permissions, you need to make sure and hit the default drop down and select the state, Idaho, for it to refresh back to zeros to pull in all of your new permissions that you got. So just a good reminder there. Deleting items in ProTracks and Conservation Desktop. So this is related to that CSP, or creating items in ProTracks prior to running it through CART. This is basically the steps. It's also going to help us when we get ready for doing modifications, when we got to delete items or whatever we've got to do, creating items in Conservation Desktop here in the future. We've got to also remove that. So if we delete them out of ProTracks, we've got to remove them out of CD as well. So if you just remove them out of ProTracks, it's not going to delete them out of CD, so that's what that checkbox is there for. I'd recommend if you are going to be deleting them out of ProTracks, that you also check that box for CD, because if not, you're going to just get confused. So, Adam DeBolt and Jerry Coral found this cool feature. Maybe some other people already knew this existed, but I thought it was cool to me. If you want to create a buffer, there's a few preconditions up there. We got to have the PLU in the practice schedule. We got to have a graphic point entered in there. I referenced the lesson plan where you can find how to put in a graphic point, or a shapefile point of where the pivot center is going to be, and make sure that it's visible. And then we have the create edit practice dialog open. Once we do that, we can go through this process of adding a pivot from a point just using a buffer. That way, if we have the pivot length from maybe the construction person's design, we can pop this pivot in here pretty close to exact. The only issue is we've got to know where the center is. So once we know that center, we can complete the buffer tool, and we can add that practice for like 442 to then put our circle in halfway, and we can use the edit tools to clip around wherever we need to stop the pivot or whatever we're doing. So thought we'd just throw that in there as well. Okay, so keep the questions coming. I see that we've got a few in here. Keep them coming. We're going to address them all at the end, and if we don't address all of them, we will go ahead and send out an email to everyone with the questions report on there. So jumping into CART now. So CART Assessment Questions Report Tool. I sent out an email on the 7th of February about guidance on how to work through the guide sheet. The notes are needed to document why that answer was selected. This is really just to assist you in completing your inventory in the field. CART does not take away our field visits. CART is meant to make us go to the field more. And this questions report tool will help us know what questions CART is going to be asking us. So I posted this here on the planning portal. I've also posted it on our CART guidance SharePoint, which I'll show here in a little bit. The National Office has given us CART guide sheets. I think they're really good. I sent them out on, I guess, the 4th of February. I think that's probably the 7th, but I sent out these guide sheets. They were pretty good, I would say, in answering a lot of questions that we've had. So if you have a question, go to these guide sheets first. They've posted 2 new ones as of Valentine's Day. So they're posted on the SharePoint as well, and I'll show you where that location is. So just as an example, coming from the guide sheet for resource concerns to assess, this has been one of the questions, what resource concern should we select? The conservation planner determines what resource concerns will be addressed in CART. That decision comes from observations from the field site, number one, client input, and then knowing local and state conservation practices and program requirements. Also working with the client to figure out, what resource concerns they may be looking at. If they're really just wanting residue management, maybe we've got some goalies we need to fix as well, right? Those kind of can go hand in hand. There's a lot of different examples we could put in there. But the client obviously came to us with a problem, and that needs to obviously first and foremost be assessed. And then the planner also would maybe be talking with the client to see what other additional concerns may be revealed. Sometimes the program could also influence what resource concerns we need to address. So in CSP, there's required resource concerns that have to be assessed. Sent out in Lori's bulletin, it explains what resource concerns need to be done. So programs can often regulate that as well. So like I said, those fact sheets are really good. CART assessments. Just some of the functionality lingo that I may use from time to time. One case file can and should lead to multiple practice schedules. Only time that a participant should have multiple case files is if an operation is maybe in a completely different location or area. If a client already has a case file, users should not create a new case file for each application or fiscal year. We want to use that same case file because what's happening right now in our system, we've got a million different case files under one, maybe not a million. We've got a lot of case files under one participant, and it's confusing of which one has got the right land units and kind of makes it a mess. So if you can simplify that, I don't want to have you go back and fix all of those, but just do your best to, from now on, to try and keep one case file and then multiple practice schedules. Then on to the next bullet, one application could be on one practice schedule. Practice schedules that are deferred, you can rename them using that practice or using the Manage Application dialog button that I showed earlier. You can also put in multiple, okay, that's on the next one. So programs must be separated by different practice schedules. So if you have an EQIP practice schedule, you need to have then a CSP practice schedule as well. Or if you're doing CSP and EQIP, you need to have two practice schedules, one for each. One practice schedule could be entered into multiple ranking pools within one program. So that's coming. We'll show you how that works at a later date, not today. But let me say that again, one practice schedule can be entered into multiple ranking pools. And you can enter one application for each ranking pool, or you can have one application that's in multiple ranking pools. There's just a bunch of different combinations here. Don't get too wrapped around the axle. It'll all sort itself out here in the future. CART assessment guidance. So if you have questions regarding CART assessment, we're going to route these through your area conservationist or area resource conservationist. They're going to collect all these questions and then direct them to the specialist as needed. The reason we're doing this is to centralize where these questions are coming from and then distribute them. We're going to put the common questions and answers are going to be posted on this WFAQ, I guess. I don't know what that even means, but we're just going to have a question and answer spot in this CART guidance SharePoint, and I'll show you here on this next button. We just have this Idaho CART guidance SharePoint that we just created, so we're still rolling out stuff, but you have documents over on the right, and then some links there in the middle, and then over on that far left in the menu we have a CART Q&A. So we're building out how that's going to look, and we're starting to put some questions in there as we get them. So be patient with us, but if you have a question, you may check on the SharePoint before you send it up. But please route your questions to your area resource conservationists, and then we'll kind of gather them all up again at the state office and then distribute them. We feel like a lot of the questions are the same throughout the state. Okay, so now I'm going to go into a cart live demo. I understand that a lot of you paid attention to the national cart demo, and I also understand that a lot of you probably have not. So I'm going to do my best to fill in the gaps here. I feel like the national webinar was very vague and very basic, so I'm going to try and dive into a few little things that I feel like will benefit you. In order to run CART, we have to have a case file created or a case file in use and a practice schedule with line units added to that practice schedule. Then underneath that practice schedule, we need to select assess, as you can see here. So while I get my conservation desktop up, I'm going to have you answer the poll of which CART assessment you would like to run. Let's see if I can open it here. Hide, maximize, new poll. Open. There we go. Okay, so go ahead and answer there. While I get conservation desktop up, you can answer, and then I'll take a look at that and see which one we want to go to. I have two examples. And as a reminder, if you have questions going through this, go ahead and type your question in, and we'll answer it here at the end. Okay, I am going to be using the training site. Functionality is pretty close to the same. There's a few things that I'll point out what's different, but I will show you that. So I'll give you like 10 more seconds to answer the poll, but it looks like pasture is winning right now. Can you guys see, can you see the answer?
Yeah, but you hit the button and I don't see what you hit to make it go anywhere.
Okay, we'll broadcast the results. Now do you see it, Treg?
Yes.
Okay. Having like a back and forth. One gets added for pasture, one gets added for dry cropland. So we'll do the pasture one here now, and we will end this poll. I'm trying to be a little more techy here and trying to get some more fun stuff in here. Let me go get this case file. I'm going to open the search, and I do have it in Caldwell. So this is our pasture example. So an irrigated pasture, so management. One of the fields has a water tank and pipeline already there that they've completed, that we've done with them, and so they want to move on kind of to the next field and then improve their management some more. So this is just a simple little layout. This isn't 100% real, but I tried to make it as real as possible. So I have my land units. You can see that they're outlined in yellow. I've got my two pasture fields right here, and then I have a little crop field that I'm going to call my garden, where my high tunnel is going to go. So we're going to assess my pasture and my high tunnel at the same time, okay? In the same practice schedule under my EQIP 2020 practice schedule. So here's that assess button. I'm going to select it, and then CART will open up in a new browser window, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Not a little, it's going to take like about a minute or so to crank through this information. What it's doing is it's pulling the soils layer, it's pulling other geospatial layers to know where we need references, taking that clip from the practice schedule PLU. So when you first come in, and you haven't started an assessment yet, you need to come in, you'll come and name it. You probably just name it the same as your practice schedule would be the easiest. I don't know why you would really change it, but you could if you so desire. So like I said, it's going to continue to work. We don't have the thinking fingers in CART or the dots of progress, but we have the I don't know, what do we call this bar? I don't know what to call the bar. We'll have to think of something. The martini bar? I don't know what that is. Okay.
Barbershop pole.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Ira will listen.
Wow, okay. We're going to keep the comments to yourselves. It's still thinking here. Don't worry, your computer hasn't froze. It's
So you can run multiple assessments on the same plan.
so you would have like your pasture and your high tunnel. Is that what you're meaning?
Or say you ran through the assessment and you wanted to see what would happen if you answered it differently. You could run through a different assessment on the same land unit.
You would have to create a different practice schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one assessment per practice.
One assessment per practice schedule, correct. Yeah.
But you can rerun it.
Yeah, you can go adjust and correct your answers if you made a mistake. So first things I'm going to point out, so once everything calculates and cranks through, you have your land units that show up here, sorted by tract and land unit. If you have this crop and irrigated on pasture, you need to come in here and apply like your max irrigation. So we're going to say 40 inches, and I'm being completely probably inaccurate, but you can change this attribute here as well. You can change it to a different land use. Just note that this land use does not update in Conservation Desktop. It'll only update for your cart run. So the recommendation is to evaluate the land unit as it is at the time of application, not maybe what you're going to. I'm going to put 40 if you got furrow irrigation. What these modifiers do too is it's going to give you certain questions within CART. So select all and any resource concerns that, or select all and any modifiers that may be applicable to that land unit. This is at a land unit state, so make sure that you are at per land unit, so you can see these acres are typed separately. Up here in the top, we have only the two options to update the assessment status from in assessment to discarded. If maybe you decide this isn't going to go forward, the client says, I don't want to do anything with you guys anymore, peace. You could discard this and then it would show up in your assessment results up here. When you click on assessment, this is going to bring in all the assessments by the service center. And I'll show you that at the end. Once you get your land units, you can also say, you know what, I accidentally selected that field, we don't need to add it. My recommendation is not to uncheck it here, but to go remove that land unit from the practice schedule, from the conservation plan. Go remove that land unit, then go reload CART so that everything just matches. But you could uncheck a field here if you don't want it to be included in the assessment. So CART runs the same way like we read a book. We go left or right. So we're going to start with resource concerns. What resource concerns are we going to make applicable? So for pasture, you're going to have these, or for this dialogue, we're going to have these options to sort it by tract or land use. I kind of like the land use view. That's how I'm going to find these resource concerns that we're interested in. And you can select these checkboxes as needed, or you can obviously just check one at a time. So first off, I'm going to go and choose plant productivity and health, which is degraded plant conditions. Sorry, I can't really see that very good. So we're going to plant productivity and health, and we're going to do that for crop, and I think I'm going to actually do it on the pasture one as well. Yes. So we're going to do that on all the land units, and then we're going to go down to field sediment and nutrient loss. We're going to select the surface loss for surface water. There we go. And we're going to do that just for pasture. For my crop, I'm just doing a high tunnel on my cropland, and so the only resource concern we're treating is plant productivity and health. So that's the only one I'm going to select for crop. Okay. And then we're going to go to sediment in surface water as well for the pasture. And then we're going to go to livestock, I think is one of them. Livestock production limitation, feed and forage balance for pasture. And then also water for the pasture one. And like I said, these resource concerns would be selected by client input, field observation, anything else that maybe you may see out there. And then, where's my pest pressure one? Pest pressure, we're going to select pest pressure on just my pasture as well. And then soil quality limitations, we're going to select compaction on my pasture. Source water depletion, we're going to do inefficient irrigation on my pasture. And then sheet and rail erosion on my pasture as well. So, as you can see, as I scroll down, I'm going to see that this builds out a table down here on the bottom showing what resource concerns are going to be selected or evaluated and assessed. This is building out what questions you're going to have to answer. So you have already done this through your field questions tool to figure out what resource concerns we want to look at, and then also with the client. Once you've completed selecting all the resource concerns that you want, we can select done and then save resource concerns. Once that has come back, we go back up to the top to our breadcrumb trail, as we call it, and we'll see that our resource concerns will be changed to complete. Okay, and if you left one of those resource concern or one of those land units that they weren't done, this would just say in progress for one of them. Once we've completed knowing what resource concerns we want to assess and to evaluate, we then move on to resource inventory. This is going to filter all of the questions in the background that don't apply to any of those resource concerns and turn them off. So I've already went through as if I went to the field and identified which field I want to address each resource concern on. So I'm going to come through my inventory. So we first select our land use up at the top. We can see that it's in progress, which means some of the geospatial questions probably already got answered, and there's others that need to be completed. This first question under inventory is geospatial web service or programmatically answered. So that's going to be changed to software answered to be a little better with our terms. And it's identifying that we have a dry climate. This is coming a lot from our soil survey. So a lot of everything that they showed in our national webinar was that they clicked on every single question. I'm going to show you a little cheat is using this next question button, and it's going to populate us to this next value. I'm going to also sort this by land use just to make it a little bit easier, and then expand out my land uses so I can see the land units to select. The process and how this happens is we have to first select an answer, and then we go select the land unit that answer goes to. The reason that the crop land unit is not selectable in compaction is because we didn't say that that was a resource concern we were going to evaluate. We only said we were going to evaluate that in pasture. So whenever you have a question that needs to be answered, you'll get a little yellow triangle with an exclamation point. So on this one, I'm going to say that in field 1, my compaction is not significant. And then in field 6, we do have compaction going on. So we can see that we have the different answers that get populated, and then if we change our answer over here, it's going to move that checkbox wherever it is. If we want to clear it or change both of them to be significant or remove it, we can make those changes there as I show it. So now we have both of those answered. Like I said, I like using this next question. Anything that's geospatial, it already has an answer in there. We can't change the answer, but it's somewhat interesting to see some of the results. I'm just going to crank through these. So livestock on the PLU, we're going to say yes to the pasture and no to our crop. And we have a cow-calf operation. As you can see, where we said no on crop, that question is not applicable anymore. We're going to say that we have 11 to 100 animals on this land use. This is a per PLU currently, not as what it could be. This is just what are we looking at. As you can see, there are pretty big gaps between here. So this is more just for reporting, not necessarily evaluating the resource concerns. So we're going to say 11 to 100, go to our next question. Okay, so feed and forage. We're going to say that it is inadequate for feed and forage on this operation for both land units. And then the livestock water, we said that we already have some water on field 1. So in field 1, we're going to say that all 3 factors, water factors, are met. The additional guidance for this in the questions report tool in the reference column state that it's the quality, quantity, and distribution of water for this answer. So makes it a little clearer. Make sure you use that field tools reference sheet. And then field 6, there is no current water there. Okay, so now we'll go to the next question, and we'll go to plant productivity. So this is relating to our high tunnel question. As you can see, we're only looking at our crop. And so on crop, we are saying that we have a good plant productivity. Now, with high tunnels, I think that it's important that we know that the potential of crop yield is based on the soil, climate, and fertility of your field. So don't get hung up around, well, I want to grow bananas. Don't worry about what you want to grow, or I want to grow tomatoes, but they die every single year, so I need a high tunnel. Like we're looking at the crop yield of your garden. Okay, is it 100% potential, 75% potential, 50% potential? That's how that is looked at. Crop plant health. We are saying this is looking at the nutrient deficiency and nutrient disease. So look at these answers as you go and answer this as well. Don't just say, oh, well, we have frost, so our plants are damaged. We are saying, no, there's probably minimal deficiency of nutrients and minimal disease showing up. So that would be my answer on that question. So we'll go to the next. We'll go to the pasture group, and you can see that we only see pasture questions. So I'm just going to keep cranking through these and stop talking nearly as much. So pasture irrigation score, we're going to say that field 1 is good. And field 6 is fair. Okay. Same with this one, we're going to go with good. on field 1, and fair. This would just be on your assessment as you're out there in the field. So just make sure you're just answering these questions how it is, how it looks as you're evaluating it. So if you already have a pasture condition score sheet, this is really easy. You've already been out to the field. If you haven't been out to the field, make sure you go out there. So this is quite a bit of clicking. Plant desire or percent desirable plants, we're going to say it's fair for the entire pasture group. You notice as I clicked that last question, all of a sudden our land use button went green. So you're going to be looking for these check marks for green. If it's not green, you're going to have to go back through and find the question you didn't answer. In training, this is one of the differences in production. In training, this geospatial web service testing only is just showing up for training. So these are just all the other geospatial questions that were automatically answered. This does not show up in production. It's just behind the scenes and hidden. Okay, so management. We'll go just keep working down. Irrigation system. Let's see. So we already answered the amount of inches per year in the modifier, line unit modifier. And then we're going to say that it's the irrigation delivery system. So this answer here is all of the fields in the pasture. Okay. And then no IPM system, but pesticides are sprayed with minimal information. So this is just about done. As you can see, there's quite a few clicks that we have to get through in here. This one is going to say we do have nutrients applied in, no, we're going to say no nutrients are applied. If you read the reference in that questions report tool, which will become hover text, so when I put my cursor over this no nutrients applied, there will be hover text there in the future. I believe that'll be April, but it talks about, note this does not include nutrients deposited by grazing animals when these are the only nutrients applied to the PLU. So if you're just grazing, putting animals there, now once we see that this is complete, we can mark all these line units complete, and then we'll save answers. Like I said, if you're still in progress or you just save it, you can come back, or you need to run back out to the field to verify another answer. You can save it and then come back to it, and it'll just be in progress. Okay, so that's all of my input for my questions. Now we're going to go to existing practices. So on field 1, if I remember right, we have an existing practice showing up that was, oh crap, it's in field 6. Okay, well, it's going to evaluate it a little funny, but it's in field 6. So field 6, we're showing that we already have applied livestock pipeline and watering facility. If you go out to the field and these practices are not functional, meaning they are not up to standards and specs, you will uncheck this box and write in a comment and say, like, the water trough broke and is no longer being used. It's really, really small for me. And then we'll say okay. And what this does is it makes it not count towards points in meeting the threshold of that resource concern. So if you have any other observed practices, let's say if they were already applying 528, okay, we can go in there and say they're already completing prescribed grazing plan according to standards and specs, everything's all written up, we can apply that. This is only necessary, you need to make sure and enter this if they're meeting standards and specs. If they're not doing it, there's really no benefit to add a not functional practice that's not already there. The not functional button is really available so that we can turn on or off these end pads coming across practices. So just pay attention to that. When you add a practice, as you can see, you can filter, you can play with all the different kinds of practices that there may be. Long-term, if there's an easement already on there, that would probably just come across. But you can enter and sort multiple practices you could search for. If we just search crop, it's going to pull up anything that has crop in it. So pretty self-intuitive. If we accidentally added a practice in cart, we can hit mark for deletion, and then I'll save it. And then we've removed it. I don't really want to show that they're completing 528 on there. So once we get this line unit complete, there's no other existing practices. I will mark this line unit complete. And then same with this one, I didn't observe anything else, so I'll mark this line unit complete. Okay, so we'll mark all of them complete, and then we'll select save.
Is there going to be any way, when you start getting a lot of fields, is there going to be any way that some of this stuff, instead of just click, 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 marking them all, clicking at once?
They are building in some functionality to like the select all, unselect all, and grouping, crop grouping. Yeah, they're working on it.
On some of our.
They're working on it. It's just right now we are just getting a function that would function. Does that even make sense? A software that would function. So once we have our existing practices out or completed, we can move on to our plan practices. So this would come from your planning and conversations with the landowner on what you want to do. This is where I think your plan practices is really going to come in, Treg, is where I want to apply this practice on all of the land units instead of going through individually. But right now, this is what we got. Okay, so same format here. I'm going to sort this by land use just so I can get it a little easier. So we'll see that it's not started to add a plan practice. On our cropland, we're going to add 325, our high tunnel application, or a high tunnel practice. For this scenario, we're going to mark this practice as primary. Primary resource concerns are those that address the resource concern directly. A supporting practice would be one that needs to be adopted in order to complete that primary practice. There's a fact sheet on that. We're still kind of working up some of the guidance on that. If you have questions, we might skip them for today or work on them a little bit later today to get those answered. Okay, so then in our pasture, so that's all we want to do on our cropland. On our pasture in field 1, we're going to add our practices here. So we're going to do 528. I'm going to select 528, 614. As you can see, I'm kind of doing multiple practices at a time, but it's not by the land unit. Forage biomass planting, and then some fence. And you can also search by oh gosh, that's good. Oh good, so we'll show you how to delete a practice. So we'll mark for deletion, we'll save. In order to mark the land unit complete, we have to have everything has to be marked either primary or supporting. So that's awesome. It completely wiped it out. Say that again?
You did that on purpose?
Yeah, I did that on purpose so everybody could
Search by
see.
practice name too, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Not just code, but by name.
Yeah. Nice. Oops, I already did that one. It's just easy for me to type in the practice code here.
I have to get them all memorized.
Yeah. Well, I cheated and I haven't written that wrong, wrote down. Add selected. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say these practices are primary. So forage biomass planting is primary. We're going to say that prescribed grazing is primary. Watering facility is primary. In order for us to get water to the watering facility, we have to have a pipeline to get it there. But the fence we're going to say is supporting because the fence is supporting the prescribed grazing practice. Now, Trish is looking at me funny, but...
So the watering facility addresses the lack of water but you can't get the water to the watering facility without the pipeline, so that would make that secondary.
Okay. Yeah.
I
No,
don't
that's,
know, that's just how I would
yeah,
look
that's
at
your,
it.
yeah, you're right. You're right.
We're gonna issue guidance on that.
Yeah, we're gonna, like I said, we're still working out this.
Yeah, it's gonna be a different way of thinking about it.
Does it make differences when you're in the ranking, or?
It makes differences in your assessment if you're meeting the threshold, is what I was saying. Okay, so now in line unit 6, I'm not going to do nearly as many, but this is where Treg's enhancement would be nice, where we could just say apply this practice to and 382. In my notes I wrote down 582, so that's why I was all sorts of confused. So we'll go primary, primary, supporting. Okay, and then once we get everything completed, we'll click save, and then we will jump back onto our breadcrumb trail back to our assessment summary. Bear with me just a little bit longer, I'm almost done. Okay. This is why the national office does like 4 questions when they show it up. They're like, oh yeah, look how simple this is to come in here and do it. And in all reality, I want to give you guys what it really is. There's going to be a lot of questions you have to answer and click through. It's what we have to evaluate our applications this year. So I do like it. I think that it is going to make things different this year. But I've been getting results that I can get behind. So I guess that's what I would say there. See what is going on. I'm going to refresh really fast just because I'm getting a little antsy. I can tell everybody else on the other line is probably asleep too.
I was almost hypnotized.
I know by the
Well, it's processing a lot of,
Yeah, what was
the
your
computation that it's going through. is
Yeah.
pretty
Spiral
Yeah.
wisdom.
Okay,
I
so
like
so now once we have all of our green check boxes complete, we have everything completed, we can come in here to the results button. The results are going to bring in all of that information that we plugged in. It puts point values to all of our questions to know if we're meeting or exceeding or not. You'll see this first screen comes in as the plan roll-up. Oh, wow, they fixed that. So this shows, see how this land unit now says that resource concern is met, or that whole land unit is met? That wasn't working like yesterday. So you can come into each land unit and view what resource concerns we applied. So feed and forage balance, right? We said we're going to put prescribed grazing and 528 and fence. I mean, everything kind of works all into this to calculate this. Hopefully everybody has seen a few of the bar graphs that CART is going to eventually spit out, putting us close to that threshold where we're currently at, where we're at. Nice visual for the client. That's not here yet, but it's coming. But these are the values that they're using. You notice that we assessed inefficient irrigation use, but we didn't plan any practices for inefficient irrigation use, so we remain exactly the same, which is fine. We assessed it, we said we're not doing anything with it. If something is incorrect, if CART is calculating a number for the planned or existing that is incorrect, we can complete an override. So let's say we were planning a practice on inefficient irrigation water and we wanted to select an override. Now you are going to want to have a really good explanation. Right now across CART there is only 1.5% rate of the plan override being used right now. So meaning that CART is spitting out the result that is correct. A plan override would be needed if you have a tool that is saying something different. We want to know that information. This information can be put in for later builds of CART. So like this plan practice result point don't make sense. So we would then type in our answer and say, we completed the theory run and we adopted this practice, and this is the percent or whatever. According to planning criteria, we should be meeting by adopting this practice. That's where you would put this here. We would add the practice, we could save it, we could remove the override, so on and so forth. I imagine that 1.5% use of override is going to increase as more assessments get in, as program deadlines come. There will be some work that comes through on that. We do have a really good explanation on the CART guidance SharePoint that will explain those overrides, when they're needed, why they would be needed, so on and so forth. So I want to keep going on. So this plan roll-up just gives you a summary of all of this. You can print this by doing the Control-P or right-click and print. They are building in some report functions for CART here in the future. This is as far as you can go in CART today. Once we get ranking tools completed, so if you were done, you didn't want, you wanted to make sure that Bruce didn't come in here and screw up your assessment just because he was poking around. Bruce isn't going to, because I don't know if he knows how to get there, but you can lock this for ready for ranking, and then hit update. This is going to lock the assessment, so you can't make any changes. Someone's got us on hold, but they can't hear us, so that's okay. We'll just go through it. But this basically recalculates, make sure all of the values are the same when it first crunched through all the numbers, and then stop there. I'm going to minimize this while it is recalculating. And as we come back to Conservation Desktop, those practices that we've planned can go and be digitized. So they're going to show up as draft practices already scheduled on that land unit. But you can see this fence, it's in a draft status. When we select it, we can then come through to the digitized stuff and we can split our fence to split our pasture. And then that status changes to alternative. So you'd have to do the same thing for any full extent. It's going to give you a new dialog. Do you want to use draft practices or put new ones? And what we're going to say is we want to schedule all of our 5. So then, and we're going to create all of our 528 practices, and it's going to go to alternative practice or status. So then once we save, then those practices will then be digitized and saved at this point. You can do it the other way. You can digitize first and then work into CART, and CART will pull in those practices that you've already digitized. So if you've got a deferred application, don't stress. You digitize all this stuff. It's already there. It'll pull into CART and you can use it. Let me go back to, once you've locked this for ranking, it's going to say, are you sure you want to lock? You want to make sure and verify in this locking status if anything happens. So here's where it would reload, and here's this message that says and it has to be unlocked in order to make any changes. If you make a change on a land unit, once you lock this for ranking, it's going to lock up that attribute and you can't change that information. So just some things to know. We'll get through this. Pop your questions into the questions and we will answer those. I'm going to turn the time over to James for the planning policy updates here. Planning policy and other updates. Let me get that over here.
Yeah, that's the minor. Sorry about the hold noise. We're working on that at the moment, trying to get that issue resolved. While Ori is pulling that up, I just want to say a couple of things. One is I know that there's a lot of change. There's anxiety, and we've been sensing that folks are experiencing a little bit of stress in the field. I would just say to you that patient, we're working on guidance. We're all learning this together, and we'll get through it. Don't lose sight of what we're trying to put conservation out on the ground to address resource concerns or enhance them. All right? So with that, I'm going to cover the bigger picture. This probably would have been better earlier in the presentation. But what I want to go through with you are some of the changes that we've had to our conservation planning policy, and also the release of the new national planning criteria and how that relates to CART. So just so you know, we released this a couple of weeks ago in a state bulletin. Excuse me, it was actually a national bulletin that was forwarded out. You can find it in General Manual under 180, Part 409. That's where our conservation planning policy is. And the national bulletin there is listed as 180-20-1. So all that information is contained in those two sources. Okay, so here's one of the major changes. They changed the definition of a conservation plan. All right, so the new definition reads, a conservation plan is a record of the client's decisions. I just want to point out client's decisions because it's our job to document that somewhere in the conservation plan, and we shouldn't be making assumptions for the landowners. We need to get their input on all the decisions made in the planning process. So, and supporting information for the treatment of a unit of land for one or more identified resource concerns as a result of the planning process. The plan describes the schedule of implementation for practices and activities needed to address identified resource concerns and takes advantage of opportunities. The needs of the client, the resources, and federal, state, tribal, and local requirements will be met. All right, pretty broad definition there, but please read that and understand it. It's very important to the process. All right, another big change. They added this paragraph to our conservation planning policy. This is to address CART. All right, so a nationally supported tool that automates and streamlines the resource concern assessment process. Example, Conservation Assessment and Ranking Tool, CART, which Tori was just talking to you about, or Conservation Desktop, and that's because CART's being developed and will eventually just be Conservation Desktop. Can be used to document meeting FOTOG planning criteria for a conservation program planning purpose. All right, so CART can be used in lieu of the tools that are outlined in our national planning criteria. All right, you can still go back and run those tools. Whenever you're questioning whether or not there's a resource concern or you're questioning the values that are spit out in CART, you can always fall back on the planning criteria and the tool listed in there to identify whether or not you have a resource concern. Although an automated assessment tool may not directly rely on the assessment methodology identified in the planning criteria, it utilizes similar inputs to provide thresholds to document whether planning criteria have been achieved. And when they were developing CART, they did reach out to all the states and they had us provide them all of the tools that we utilize to evaluate planning criteria. And at the time, we had a lot of state tools like CISL and FERI and INTRA, and we sent them all up to the national folks so that when they were developing the CART tool, those values would align with the values in CART. There may be some refinement we have over time, but the idea is that CART can be used in place of our tools to evaluate whether or not there is a resource concern. All right, so they also had to make some changes to our National Planning Procedures Handbook in order to incorporate CART. So there's various edits emphasizing the use of GIS layers and other data for assessing resource concerns. The backbone of CART, all of this geospatial information that we're going to be utilizing to assess and rank applications. So they had to add this statement. We have new land uses and modifiers, and I know Ori's already gone through that in the tool, but I'm going to list them out for you in a second. We updated a section of the conservation plan requirements. Okay, so here's the land use designations and modifiers. You see we got rid of the designated protected area. And for the land use modifiers, we added drained, organic, water feature, and protected. The National Resource Concern checklist, list, not a checklist, and planning criteria. If you haven't looked at this document, you need to either go into section 3 of our field office technical guide, click on planning criteria and print it out, or go to the conservation planning portal and download a copy of it. You need to read through this document. It's all new. This document replaces our existing planning criteria that we've had in the past at the state level. It is now all national planning criteria. Okay, so the release of that document instructed us to rescind and replace all previous versions of the resource concern and planning criteria guidance, which we've done. We've deleted those from PHOTOG and the conservation planning portal and uploaded the new national. The document, NRCS resource concern checklist and planning criteria is effective now. The PHOTOG state content managers basically archived all the old ones and added a new link in section 3. If we want to make any changes, we have to reach out to the National Discipline League to make any changes to the planning criteria from this point out. Again, added a link in section 3, just stating that states will not modify the existing list of resource concerns or planning criteria, and that we need, if we want to add an assessment tool, we have to consult with the National Discipline Lead in order to do so. Okay. So we also have some changes to our resource concerns. I've mentioned this in the past, I just want to reiterate it. We added 3 new resource concerns. Number 10 there under soil, which is soil organism habitat loss or degradation, and aggregate instability. Those are the new soil health related resource concerns. Additionally, under air, we've added emissions of airborne reactive nitrogen, and we changed the name of the ones listed in blue. So we've got surface water depletion and groundwater depletion, and then under animal we have terrestrial habitat for wildlife and invertebrates, and aquatic habitat for fish and other organisms. This is what our state planning criteria used to look like, right? We no longer have a cause or a component or required assessments or the screening level. This is what it looks like now. And it has, at the beginning, a really good introduction to resource concerns and planning criteria and how criteria relates to CART and the format of the resource concern. So take a look at that first page, read through all this, be familiar with it and how it relates to CART. All resource concerns are listed at the beginning of the document, and they have a little page reference so you can flip right to it, just handy. Each resource concern is listed with the following. Got a description of the resource concern, got the objective in treating the concern, tables sorted by land use, assessment methods, tools, observation in some cases, and planning criteria for the assessment method. A lot is different from the old planning criteria that we had set.
So you need to read through this and be familiar with it. This is an example of what it looks like in the document. Another example. Okay. The resource concern and planning criteria document provides the base criteria for providing conservation planning assistance. It provides the recommended field tools that can be used to assess resource concerns. Notice it says can, right? We can also use CART. And it can be used as necessary in the planning process. CART utilizes the same list of resource concerns, but it organizes them in a different level to improve the user experience. It groups resource concerns into categories for better viewing and organization. It breaks them into components to better target questions for the assessment. And based on planning criteria and similar inputs as the tools listed in the resource concern and planning criteria document, CART will document the assessment of the selected resource concerns. They're in big letters here. Conservation planners will utilize CART for all resource assessments and rarely need to use the resource concern and planning criteria document during normal conservation program planning activities. All right. When do we need to use the new planning criteria to run the tools? Answer: when you are unsure how to answer the CART assessment questions, or when the practice standard or specification requires you to run the tool for implementation of the practice. There are several practice standards that require that you run the tool. Nutrient management is an example. It requires that you run intra in order to implement nutrient management. If you are a beginning planner and you are unexperienced, I suggest you run the tool until you become familiar and confident enough to complete CART. All right. These are even bigger and bolder. So I want to make this really, really clear. You no longer need a resource concern to schedule a practice. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you run the tool and you're meeting planning criteria, you can still schedule a practice to enhance that resource. All right? So in my mind, there's 3 instances where you would schedule a practice. You have a resource concern, you're going to schedule it and take it to a higher level, but you're not quite meeting planning criteria. You're going to plan a practice or several practices, you're going to meet planning criteria, or you've already met planning criteria and you're going to take it to a higher level. Okay. All of this is reflectant on your ability to apply a practice and your level of job approval authority. You have to use your best judgment or request assistance from someone who has the appropriate job approval authority. Right? All this whole thing is predicated on your knowledge and your job approval authority level. Misuse of JAA may result in disciplinary measures. I just want to make that perfectly clear. We're taking this seriously. We're trusting that you know what you're doing, that you've earned proper job approval authority, and you're applying it accordingly. Practices must be applied according to the purposes listed in the Conservation Practice Standards. You need to become very familiar with the practice standards if you're not already. Read through them. They're very distinct in which purposes you can use them for, and they're outlined clearly in the standard. Okay, second major item. You no longer need to fully address a resource concern by the end of a contract, or at all. But you need to have a positive impact when you're implementing that practice, and you have to still have a resource concern that you're using the practice for, right? It's just that you don't have to meet planning criteria by the end. You need to be moving in that direction, however. Okay, another big point. CART does not assess potential adverse impacts, right? If you apply a practice and you have an adverse impact on another resource concern, you need to be able to recognize that as a certified conservation planner. That's part of the certification process, is being able to recognize when those things are occurring out in the field, and job approval authority. So I provided a little example here. Maybe it's not the best one, but just say you put in a pivot and you're removing wildlife habitat in order to install that practice. You need to be able to recognize when you're having adverse impact and mitigate that with a practice, right? We should already be doing that. But I just want to make that perfectly clear. Here's the $1 million statement. CART inherently relies on the planner expertise in order to identify resource concerns. You need to know what you're doing. And if you're not confident, we'll get you the training necessary. Consequently, there will be an increased level of accountability for certified planners. We expect that you all know how to identify resource concerns and answer the questions properly. If you're in doubt, run the tool listed in the National Planning Criteria. That's simple. Also, be sure to document why you answered the question in your notes. Remember, the definition of a conservation plan is a record of decision, right? Record of the client's decision, to be specific. You should be going through all this with your client and documenting. That CART assessment report tool that Lori talked about earlier, we added a notes section for a reason, so that you can go out to the field and note right on that sheet why you made the decision to answer the CART question the way you did. You need to be able to explain that to us, specifically when we're doing quality assurance activities. So actions will be taken. When? And here are some examples of some of the things that we've pulled up in the spot checks and over the past 5 years. Job sheets, which are going to be soon called implementation requirements, are missing or incomplete. You're missing signatures on the job sheets, which again will be called implementation requirements. Practice standards and specs are not followed. Supporting information or certified quantities are missing when certifying a practice. Or there's no as-built documentation. Or finally, the planner did not have adequate job approval authority to design or install the practice. You want to add anything, Bruce? That's not an all-inclusive list.
Yeah, I don't think I need to add anything, just that I like your list.
Right. Excellent. So that concludes my portion. Any questions on that?
I think what we'll do is we'll just go through, we've got about 15 minutes left, and then go ahead and enter your questions into the Adobe Connect screen, and we will go through these. Lori's going to read them off, and then we will answer them, and we'll also open up the phone line when we get through these questions for any verbal questions that you may have as well. So.
Okay, first question. Will we be able to keep the soils toolbar in ArcGIS?
So I believe that the soils toolbar is going to stay because it's its own ArcMap add-in, whereas the toolkit toolbar runs off of the toolkit interface to populate. So we will keep the soils toolbar.
Presentation to reference.
Yeah, so we're going to send out this with the recording link as well. We'll send out the slides, and then as well as a few of the fact sheets that the National Office provided, so then you can use them.
I have found that if you use the client button with CD, it leads you to think there's no case file for a client, and duplicates end up being created. We need to use the search and not the client button to avoid this. But that isn't intuitive since you are supposed to be pulling in a client in Toolkit as the first step. Is there a way to delete duplicate case files if we made this mistake?
Yeah, so the way we would go about, you're exactly right. It's kind of tricky because you're trying to make a new client. I think regular business, I guess, to follow would be to find your tract of land and see if there's any active PLUs already on that land unit that you're wanting to use. Then determine if that land unit is still within that person's case file that's true, and when you hit the identify button, you can know what case file that's located in. So you can either use that land unit, transfer that land unit into a new case file, or do whatever you want. Or if there's no active PLU layer there, then you may just start a brand new case file or use an existing case file that person's already had. I will say that to the second part of the question, can you delete a case file? So if you go into the case file accordion and hit manage case file, you can, let me just go share it. I'm stumbling over my words here. If you expand it over and you expand the case file window here, or sorry, you go to the client view and hit manage cases. This is why I wanted to show it. If there are multiple case files located, they will be showing up here, and you can come up and hit delete case. You can only delete a case file if you have certain restrictions that will tell you if it is, but if it's just a duplicate, you can just delete it right away. There's no need to do anything else. So next one.
Okay, how do we quickly see if our phone number is correct in the production site?
So you'd want to go through to conservation products to just verify that. So go to conservation products and go to create a conservation plan or a schedule of operations, and then you will be able to check your phone number.
Are you saying that if we are converting from crop to pasture through an application, the land unit should be assessed as crop?
Currently, that's how it's being looked at. That's what the land use is, and your land use needs to be. We'll follow up on current guidance as well on this. It's a little different too, so we'll follow up with that question.
Do you suggest we take the 45-page question sheet with us in the field to answer questions, so we are ready to answer questions in CART?
If you'd like to, I mean, go for it. But ultimately, I think you're going to know some of the resource concerns the client's looking for, first off, and then you're going to know your area. So, and if you don't know your area, get in your pickup truck and go drive around and see what resource concerns you may be seeing. And then you can know what questions to ask and be looking at. But kind of like that resource concern fact sheet says, the client is coming in to you, talk to you for a reason. And I just have a conversation and figure out what exactly they're wanting to do. But no, you don't have to evaluate every single question.
Do we only address the fields we are going to contract on, or do we add in other fields as well?
So when you're doing your assessment, so an assessment can be completed just for CTA, and we can have that information ready for the client. You know, basically to the step that I did today, we can say, look, client, here's where you're meeting your threshold, here's where you're not meeting the threshold, and here's some practices we could play with to meet or go above the threshold. Here's where your problems are. So it could be a CTA, you could do everything, or you could do just the items that you're doing a contract on. Just know that any practice that you put in and move through the ranking process will be available for funding in that practice schedule. So if you want to just do a CTA practice, and then you also have some program practices that are going to receive funding, you don't want to lump those together in the same practice schedule right now. They're working on some functionality in CART right now to change that, but you want to have separate practice schedules. There's a CTA planning guide fact sheet as well that I'll send out with this presentation.
Can you clarify that they need to refer to the CART Resource Assessment Guide or the spreadsheet that they take to the field for the description of what each answer means, i.e. good, low, high, etc.?
Yeah, so the reference column, like I said in that, what do we call this? The CART Assessment Questions Report Tool, Idaho, big name. But it's going to be very valuable until that hover text comes into CART. That reference column is going to be the hover text, so it's hard to know what we're looking at with just the short answer. So yes, make sure you're looking at that spreadsheet, taking it to the field to answer those questions so that you know how to answer the good or whatever.
So on a CSP application where we have 50 plus fields, we'll be answering questions on each field, resulting in hundreds of questions that will need to be answered for these applications.
Correct. There's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of clicking, just so that you can use, you know, if it's all one crop, if it's all the crop line and all the questions are the same, you can hit crop all the way from all those questions.
Same rotation.
But there are a same rotation, yeah, and CSP is building in the crop groups portion into CART too, so when we get CSP applications starting to run through, you'll see that.
And we'll probably go over a quick little webinar to go through CSP, CART, and ranking, because that will look a little bit different.
Yeah. Good point.
Since you no longer need to have an existing resource concern, and you also no longer need to meet planning criteria, why would you need to use the override?
To show that you are meeting planning criteria. This tool is going to be used for CSP as well. That's when we've used it so far.
So again, there should be limited instances where you're using the override. And if you are going to use that override, you need to adequately explain why you did and what the answer was from the tool that you used. Huh?
That's the end of the written questions that we have. Like I said, we'll get together our questions and answers on the SharePoint. But are there any verbal questions or any clarifications that we need to address? We got about 5 minutes, so if we need longer, I'm here.
No.
Okay, never mind. We got 5 minutes.
No, you're not.
The room's booked at noon,
Oh, the room's booked at noon. Just kidding. We got to be out at noon.
but they can call you.
Okay, somebody say something so we know you can still hear us.
Or press *6. Also will unmute you.
Maybe we have a problem there. Can you chime in the chat?
Oh, here we go.
We
somebody.
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Come on, fire away. It's your chance. Everybody's in the room. Don't be shy. Okay, put your questions on the Q&A document, please. We'll do our best to answer those.
Mark them up through the arcs, and yeah, if you have any questions, I mean, obviously send them to whoever, and we'll route them wherever we need to get the answer. And like you can tell, we're still working through a few of these things, and we're still working through it because the national office is still working through it. So make sure, you know, just be patient with us. I know you are, but just remember that. So anything else, I think we'll call it good. Thank you for everyone's participation and support, and we'll talk to you next time.